How's it going, everybody? This is Moses Leos for Txsportscast.com. Well, just when we thought that the conference realignment talking college football was over, Texas A&M decides to throw a wrench into that engine and pretty much bring everything in college football to a complete standstill as Texas A&M decided over the past week that they are inclined and are interested into joining the Southeastern Conference or the SEC. And in fact, Texas A&M Regents are going to meet up on Monday, this upcoming Monday, a rescheduled meeting of which they were supposed to have in 2 Mondays, on the 22nd, to discuss whether or not moving to the SEC would be a good thing. And they are hoping that with that meeting, and this is all according to the Fort Worth Star Telegram, by the way. I apologize. All this information is according to the Fort Worth Star Telegram. They are hoping that by having this meeting on Monday, they could persuade the state legislators who are holding their own emergency meeting about Texas A&M moving to the Southeastern Conference. They would be able to persuade them to vote in favor of Texas A&M and allow them to move into the conference. The reason why the state is throwing their hat into this matter is because they want to make sure that that it's fair to the Big 12, that the Big 12 is not going to get shorted because of Texas A&M moving out of the conference, especially after the conference almost destroyed itself last year. And secondly, to make sure that schools in the state of Texas, especially Texas Tech, Baylor, and some of the other small schools in Texas don't get hurt because of it. And it's all based on funding, both on education, on the educational level, and on athletics level. It's all based on funding, whether or not moving to the SEC would benefit A&M and the state of Texas as a whole. And that's the reason why the legislature wants to have this meeting. Texas A&M feels like they need to move into this conference. They need to move outside and separate themselves from the Big 12, and to kind of, I would suppose, give themselves a new lease on their college football legacy. One of the bigger reasons why they want to move is because of Texas and the Longhorn Network. The fact that Texas A&M is still very upset and disappointed that Texas has their own network and could essentially be given a helpful tool and aid of which will help them recruit over Texas A&M and further impede the Aggies on getting recruits going into Texas A&M and to going into their school. And that's one of the main reasons why Texas A&M wants to leave the Big 12 to move to the SEC. Honestly, I think it's a little silly for Texas A&M to be moving into the SEC on just the fact that one of the main reasons why is because of the Longhorn networks that's really bothering Texas A&M. And the reason why is because if A&M wants to go out there and say, well, Texas's recruiting stature is already good enough, the Longhorn network's going to make it worse for us to recruit, that's a little preposterous. Because if you're going to move into the SEC with that claim, that's outrageous, because the SEC is an even more cutthroat and even more competitive conference to recruit in than the Big 12 is. Granted, Oklahoma and Texas dominate the recruiting classes in Texas every year, but in the SEC, A&M will have to recruit in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, all those states of which most of those SEC schools reside in. They'll have to recruit there as well as the state of Texas. A&M's going to lose a bit of their foothold in Texas because they're going to move out into the SEC. And while some recruits will see that Texas A&M is in the SEC and will say, well, that's a nice conference, that's pretty cool, a lot of them are going to say, well, wait a minute, hold on. Texas A&M might be very good, but they're going up against some of the big boys. They're going to be playing against Florida, LSU, Alabama, and while A&M is very good, they haven't been consistently good enough to where I think most people can accurately say they can compete on a regular basis against those SEC teams every year, year in and year out. And not just on the football field, but in the recruiting field as well. I think a lot of people are very, very hesitant to give A&M that kind of credibility right now. In fact, according to the Austin American statesman Cedric Golden, on one of his tweets that he had recently, I think it was this afternoon, on Friday afternoon, he talked about how he, in his mind, Mike Sherman is kind of sweating bullets right now, because right now, with the Big 12 as it is right now, Texas A&M is in a pretty dominant state. Texas is not Texas is a bit on the decline. Baylor is pretty good, but they're still on the rise. And the only team that they have to contend with in the Big 12 is Oklahoma. And this is probably going to be far-reaching for the next couple of years. For A&M to move into the Southeastern Conference, a conference of which is so good in every sport, not just football, but in baseball and basketball and some of the minor sports, swimming, softball, you name it. They are a little bit more ahead of the Big 12 in athletics. A&M is going to be hard-pressed to find themselves competing with a lot of these teams year in and year out. And for Mike Sherman, at least from the gridiron perspective, it's going to be difficult for him to really find himself winning in the SEC against the big boys in the SEC, the South Carolinas, the Floridas, and the Alabamas. So for Texas A&M, it's kind of a mixed bag because on the one hand, I think a lot of people can see that yes, moving would be pretty beneficial for them if they could. They would stand to make a little bit more money than what they have in the Big 12, and they'll be in a much more prestigious conference to where if they do happen to be very good, they can get into a much more prestigious bowl game than what they would in the Big 12, and they have a little bit more credibility in the Bowl Championship Series or in the BCS. But on the other hand, the thing is just whether or not they're going to be able to do that. Whether they're going to be able to do that. Whether they're going to be able to recruit on a much higher level than what they are right now. Time will have to tell. Texas A&M has a long way to go, and there's still 2 meetings of which is going to allow them to kind of think this thing through. If they do, good for them. Great for them. Good for the Aggie fan base. Obviously, they'll all be very happy, but at the same time, it's just that slight bit of hesitance, I would imagine, because going from the Big 12 to the SEC is a huge jump in athletic competition.